Hey Hammers, we're back with another exclusive video packed with the latest twists around our beloved West Ham United. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you never miss a breaking update, a transfer ripple, or a behind-the-scenes whisper from Rush Green. The mood around the London Stadium is electric and uneasy all at once. 2 games and 2 defeats, 8 conceded, and the volume is deafening. Graham Potter has drawn a line in the sand inside that dressing room, making it crystal clear that reputations won't protect anyone while he rips up the midfield pecking order and insists on absolute buy-in to a front foot identity. The message is simple and stark: run, press, and execute, or make way. Behind the scenes, phones have barely stopped ringing. West Ham have been scrambling for midfield reinforcements before the window slams shut, and the names doing laps around Rush Green are getting louder by the hour. Yves Bissouma has suddenly become gettable after slipping out of favor across North London, the kind of athletic ball winner who can flip a transition in a heartbeat. Mateus Fernandes, the Southampton prospect the club have monitored all month, remains squarely on the radar. The brief is blunt legs control and discipline in the center of the park, or the changes will be ruthless. If a domino tips, this midfield could look unrecognizable by deadline night, and that's exactly the kind of shock the manager seems prepared to administer. Complicating everything is the swirl around the core that carried the badge through storms. Before, Everton sounded out Tomas Soucek, and West Ham knocked them back, unwilling to share leadership from the middle while the rebuild is still wet cement. But nothing is off the table. If the right bid hits the facts at the right time, that's the reality of deadline week football. Hold your breath. The stance on Soucek is becoming a litmus test of the club's resolve. Keep the spine steady while you reinforce or cash in to fund the pivot you really want. For now, the door stayed closed to Goodison, but calls are bouncing all over Europe. You can feel the aftershocks of the last 12 months in every conversation. Lopetegui in and out. Potter parachuted in January, handed a fractured campaign and a promise of patience. A messy end to last season, a first full preseason that hasn't yet translated into points, and a board that wants proof the reset is real, something more tangible. Then a presentation deck and a handful of good training clips. This is where projects are either forged or folded. Sources around the squad whisper that standards and training have been dragged into the spotlight. Potter is said to be ready to park a fan favorite if pressing triggers aren't hit and distances aren't covered. No more passengers, no more reputations picked on name alone. If a new 6 arrives to screen the backline, the dominoes could fall fast as a senior midfielder eased to the bench, a wide player repurposed centrally for control, and a set-piece shakeup. To stem the bleeding on transitions, that's the chatter, and it matches the urgency of the shopping list. The numbers are brutal, and the manager knows better than anyone that a third straight defeat turns noise into sirens. Zoom out, and the market picture gets even edgier. Tottenham's stance on Bissouma has softened just enough to invite late inquiries, and you can feel the chess game across the capital. Do Spurs push him out on loan? Do West Ham go all in for the profile they've lacked since the spring, or does a swap talk fantasy briefly light up the wires before everyone sobers up? Meanwhile, alternative routes are open. Hayden Hackney's name has entered the chat as deadline week pragmatism takes over. None of this guarantees a signature, but it tells you exactly how acute the need has become. Part of the tension here is emotional, not just tactical. Supporters have watched rivals cherry-pick talent while the Irons have dithered on key profiles, and every rumor now carries the weight of a season. One camp argues for ruthless turnover. Fresh legs, fresh voices, fresh demands, while another warns that ripping out too many anchors at once invites chaos. Soucek in that sense is a symbol as much as a player sell him and you fund a pivot. You crave keep him and you protect a heartbeat while you build around it. Both choices are defensible, neither is painless. What's undeniable is the shape of the pitch during those opening fixtures. The distances between the lines have been too generous. The counter press has been a half step late. The lanes down the sides of the 6 have been open for business. That's why the profile brief keeps repeating like a metronome ball-winning press. Resistance, clean first pass under pressure. Bissouma ticks a lot of those boxes. Fernandes brings legs and upside. Hackney adds the homegrown glue that makes a squad breathable across 4 competitions. The recruitment team knows exactly what Their shopping for the clock is the enemy. And then there's the noise around authority. Who sets the tone and how loudly they say it. Managers don't usually go to the mat in August, but the reality is that a plan built on field position and intensity lives or dies on total compliance. That's why training ground clips and data sprints matter this week almost as much as scouting. Reports. Potter's message is uncompromising because the schedule is unforgiving. One wrong turn and you spend the autumn climbing out of a hole while the knives come out on every phone-in across the country. The pundit class can already smell the drama, and you'd be lying if you said you couldn't feel the stakes in your chest. Meanwhile, the boardroom dance continues. Budgets, FFP contours, creative structures, loan with an obligation, sell-on clauses, performance ladders. Everyone wants the same three outcomes. By Friday night, more control without the ball cleaner exits. Under pressure and a midfield that doesn't crumble when waves hit the shoreline. That's why so many plates are spinning at once. If the first choice stalls, the second has to be actionable. If the second drifts, the third has to make football sense, not just spreadsheet sense. It is quite literally crunch time. And this is where the story becomes a referendum on belief. Either the hammers land the midfield they've been chasing and Potter's plan finally bites, or a slow start hardens into a full-blown crisis that forces tough calls in September and louder questions about whether this project is built on rock or sand. You can feel the fan base splitting down the fault line, back the ruthlessness and ride the turbulence, or hold the line with the old guard and trust that chemistry trumps churn. The truth, as ever in football, is that fortune favors the brave, but only the brave who execute. So here we are, irons the fork in the road, no one can swerve. If Bissouma's situation opens the door, if Fernandez moves from talk to terms, if Soucek stays to hold the center while new legs arrive, the entire energy of this squad can flip in a week. If not, the conversation turns darker, the questions get sharper, and every team sheet becomes a referendum on the direction of the club. Either way, the next few days will write a chapter we'll reference all season. Proof that the reset was real, or proof that it was only ever a promise on paper. Drop your verdicts below, keep it civil, and keep it claret and blue. Kawhi, if you're still with us, you know how these stories evolve. A whisper becomes a rumor becomes a bid, and then the whole picture changes with a single signature. That's why the club has widened its lens. Alongside the headline names, there's a parallel track for profiles who may not spike the algorithm, but fit like a glove. Hayden Hackney has that vibe. An organizer with a tidy engine, a player who drops 5 clean passes in a row and shifts the whole team up 10 yards without shouting about it. In a side where the distances have stretched and the counters have bitten, that sort of invisible order is worth its weight in points. But don't underestimate the psychology. Everyone saw the last 2 scorelines. Everyone heard the shows, and the callers, a week like this phrase nerves. That's why leadership matters. And why turning down the first knock for Soucek sent a message inside the building as much as outside it. You can still debate the long-term calculus, you can still argue about ceilings and pivots, but you can't accuse the club of flinching at a first gust of wind. If anything, it raises the stakes on the incomings, keep your heartbeat at the lungs, and suddenly the whole organism looks healthier. All of this sits under a bigger umbrella. What kind of West Ham do we want to be in 2025? The answer many fans give is simple. Hard-running, horrible to play against, and lethal when the game stretches. The recruitment targets reflect that identity, the training demands reflect it too. That's why this moment feels decisive. If the club lands the right midfielder, the shape of the pitch changes overnight. Fullbacks step higher. Center backs stop firefighting. Forwards get to start sprints 5 meters closer to goal. And the same supporters who trudged out under the lights last week start to believe again, not because of a slogan, but because the football matches the words. There will be twists. Maybe Tottenham style and the Bissouma door closes. Maybe Southampton. Dig in and Fernandez stays put. Maybe a new name we haven't said yet sprints up the inside lane on Thursday afternoon. That's deadline week. But the thread that runs through it all is non-negotiable. Intensity, order, and accountability. If those 3 pillars go up, the rest of the house can be decorated later. If they don't, it'll be another month of white-knuckle football, and nobody wants that. So keep your notifications on, keep your takes sharp, and keep the faith. No, because by the time the window shuts, we'll either be telling the story of a pivot that saved the season or the story of a warning not heeded in time. Either way, we'll be here to break it down with you. Smash the like, subscribe if you haven't, and tell us in the comments if you could greenlight exactly one move this week, who would it be and why? Up the irons.